Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. The war could be said to have begun by Belarus sending migrants to Poland's border. Poland had to deal with the involvement of Belarusian and Russian services. Lukashenko and Putin wanted to destabilize Poland before the invasion. This was a test of whether our defences would be effective. Polish President Andrzej Duda said in a recent interview with Gazeta Polska. President Andrzej Duda has no doubt who was behind the attempt to destabilise Poland's eastern border, which is also the border of the European Union and NATO. Was what happened on the Polish-Belarusian border a prelude to the attack on Ukraine? We unequivocally believe that it was. After all, we were dealing with the involvement, practically open, of Belarusian services. This served as a test of whether we would be motivated to defend a border, whether this defence would be effective. In the context of a hybrid attack on our border by Belarus, I always respond to such arguments like this. When I fought to win the presidential election, no one promised me that it would be easy. That's why I accept reality as it is and try my best to do my job. I believe that this was an operation of the Lukashenko regime with the support of Russia. About this, I am convinced, and not only me, but probably all the people responsible for Poland's security, who meet at meetings of the National Security Bureau, and we do not generally have any doubts in this group about what the operation was, who was behind it, and who controlled it. In 2020, there were 130 attempts to illegally cross the Polish-Belarusian border. By contrast, in 2021, there were more than 40,000. From the very beginning of this crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border, we have said clearly and openly, we are dealing with a scenario written by Minsk and Moscow. We are dealing with a completely artificial migration route created for state needs. Other countries bordering Belarus, such as Lithuania, Latvia and Ukraine, began to face similar situations. Illegal migrants mostly came from Syria, Afghanistan and Iran. There were even individuals from the African continent. They arrived in Belarus via special flights to Minsk. Let's remember that this was designed, this was coordinated, most likely in Belarusian-Russian relations, because the acquisition of these people in certain regions was beyond the capabilities and competence of Belarusian intelligence alone. It must have been coordinated with the Russians to some extent. Human tragedy often occurred at the border. Although the migrants were mostly men in their prime, Belarusian secret services also took advantage of women and children. For this reason, parts of the Polish media and the opposition insisted on opening the borders. They referred to our officers who defended the Polish border, officers of the border guard, WOT, services, police, in such a shameful way. I have long lost any illusions about decency on the part of the Polish opposition. What happened on our eastern border was thickly sown, with threads sown by Putin and Lukashenko. The destabilization of the situation in Poland would have significantly hampered the ability to provide the humanitarian and military aid given to Ukraine. Just a few months later, Russia launched an armed invasion. We have been warning since the middle of 2021, or at least since the autumn, that Operation Sluice is just a preparation for a big war, which Russia is starting in Ukraine, and it is unknown where it will end up. But indeed, as the President says, Poland was attacked first. The total length of the Polish border with Belarus is 418 kilometres. It is protected by 19 border guard posts. Part of the border runs along rivers, but the 187-kilometre-long land section is the most vulnerable. Therefore, the government decided to build a permanent barrier on the border. It was completed last June, and a few months later, electronic detection systems were installed. Day 370 of the war in Ukraine. Russian troops have stepped up their assault on Bakhmut in the Donetsk region in an attempt to encircle it. The situation in the city is extremely difficult. Despite significant losses, the enemy is throwing into battle the best prepared Wagnerian assault unit, supplemented by inexperienced recruits who on average survive on the front line for only 4 hours. The military situation in Bakhmut is becoming more difficult by the day. Despite heavy losses, the Russians threw their best prepared assault units into battle. During the night, they launched another attack with combat drones. In the area of Bakhmut, the enemy is constantly destroying everything within its range of fire. Because of such strikes, we need modern combat aircraft. Without them, our air defense system is incomplete. Although our pilots are achieving many successes, we will only really be safe when the air taboo is completely lifted in relations with our partners. Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian troops are also increasing their numbers in the directions of Kupiansk, Liman, Avdiivka and Shakhtarsk. The aggressors are not counting their losses and are sending more troops under heavy Ukrainian fire. Between 600 and 1,000 Russian soldiers are killed every day. We are focused on victory, only victory. My boys are able to fight in any weather, whether it's rain and mud or snow up to their waist. They do their job. Praise doesn't matter to them. We have been given a goal and the means we have to achieve it. According to the current data, the death inflicted on the front line with small arms is is only 2% of the fallen. The fate of clashes is now decided by artillery, aviation and mechanized troops. On this section of the front line, we are about 15 kilometers from the Russian-controlled city of Donetsk. Both sides remain in their positions because, as you can see, spring means mud, and such ground makes sprinting difficult. The second region is the huge number of soldiers on both sides ready to fight. We estimate that we will be in this area for another month, I'll add. The fire doesn't stop for an instant. Despite favourable geopolitical conditions, the Russian invasion has not yielded the expected results. Kiev predicts that lasting security in the region will be guaranteed provided Moscow withdraws from Ukraine's occupied territories and abandons its imperial aspirations in other neighbouring countries. Ukraine borders Belarus to the north. The government in Minsk sides with the Kremlin. Ukraine meets Russia from the east. The Crimea and Donbass are occupied by Russian troops and pro-Russian separatist troops. The Black Sea is partially controlled by the Russian Navy. Russian soldiers are also stationed in the southwest of the Transnistria region. Meanwhile, Belarusian guerrilla troops are being trained in Ukraine. The victory plan, prepared by former Belarusian special law enforcement officers and BIPOL military, is scheduled for X hour. It is about, for example, a situation when Lukashenko's regime will be weakened as a result of Putin's defeat in the war, and then the dormant activists of victory plans will be activated and we will start operating throughout Belarus. Yesterday in Kiev, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen announced that Washington will soon hand over the first tranche of a $10 billion economic aid package to Ukraine.
To announce the transfer of an additional amount of over $1.2 billion. That's the first tranche of about $10 billion in direct budget support that the United States will provide in the coming months. Our economic support is helping keep the Ukrainian government and critical service providers operational.
In turn, the European Union announced the launch of an initiative concerning Ukrainian children abducted to Russia. Addressing this issue was one of Poland's conditions for accepting the 10th package of sanctions against Russia.
I have an announcement for you regarding an initiative that the European Commission is launching together with Poland under the leadership of President von der Leyen and Prime Minister Morawiecki in relation to Ukrainian children. You are aware of the dramatic situation of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia and sent to Russia for adoption. Indeed, since the start of the invasion, it is estimated.
Since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, over 450 children have been killed, more than 850 have been wounded, more than 350 have gone missing, and more than 13,500 have been abducted. Official statistics include only documented cases. In reality, many more children are affected. Earlier today, Spain's National Weather Agency issued weather alerts throughout Spain, except for Extremadura in the west and the Canary Islands, as Storm Juliet swept across the country, bringing with it freezing temperatures, snow and rain. Villages and swathes of land in the Basque Country were covered by snow and the temperature was set to fall to minus 6 degrees Celsius, Spain's National Weather Agency said. The weather agency also predicted the coldest temperature will be in Guadalajara, minus 15 degrees Celsius, which is 68 kilometers northeast of the Spanish capital, Madrid. In the Balearic island of Mallorca, heavy snow and rain triggered power cuts and blocked roads. 2 sinkholes were also reported in the island's capital, Palma de Mallorca. Authorities said 2,000 people were left without electricity on Monday evening. In the neighbouring island of Menorca, rough seas forced the cancellation of ferry services. Anti-government protests have begun in Moldova's capital, Chisinau. Thousands of people have taken to the streets, paralysing the city. The pro-Russian Shore Party is responsible for the demonstrations. Police have intervened to stop the demonstrators.
Information about protests and blockades of the streets of Moldova's capital, Chisinau, emerged this afternoon. Police have sprung into action and are blocking buses carrying people who want to take part in the protests. There are reports of huge traffic jams on the roads leading to Chisinau. The demonstrations are anti-government in nature. The crowd is chanting slogans against President Maia Sandu, comparing her rule to a dictatorship. The pro-Russian opposition party, Shore, is responsible for the protests in the Moldovan capital. Moldovan authorities have argued in recent weeks that Russia has plans for a coup in the country, which include diversionary attacks on government buildings combined with the use of the opposition. There is a real prospect for Moldova to join the West. It's the interest of the citizens of Moldova to join a prosperous, democratic, and civilized Europe. Russia knows this and is trying to block it, not by military force, but Russia has unleashed, as it tried to do in Montenegro in 2016, an entire hybrid war arsenal against the Republic of Moldova. We do not see on the ground any Russian military intention to reach such a level of escalation.
That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.